All right. Well, without further ado, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our guest, Kiran Vati. He is zooming in from Mangalore, India, where he is a PhD student at the University of Mangalore, and he's also a lecturer at, am I saying it right, St. Aloysius College?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you so much and he's going to talk about his research on solitary wasps.
Yes. Okay, shall I start?
Yes. And I would like to ask everyone, if you're not speaking, to please mute yourself so we can hear him so well.
Okay, yeah. Hello, everyone. Myself, Kiran. Before I present my screen, let me briefly speak some aspects which why did I choose solitary wasp for my studies, for my research activities. Now, our planet, we have all these natural patches, green patches of land here, but because of the human civilization, it has created so much of negative impacts on this land, whatever we are seeing now. Impact in the sense there is a biodiversity loss, there is a destruction of green patches, and this is because of expansion of agriculture land. Now, why there is an expansion? Not only agriculture lands, even the expansion of urbanization, that is to create cities, areas, etc. That is to, to make needs, to give the needs for all the people, all the population in that city. Obviously, there is acquiring of land, there is trespassing of the natural habitat, because of which there is loss, which is genuine, which you can see visually. Now, what happens to these organisms? Larger mammals, we can observe that, we can see visually that they move from one location to other location in search of food, shelter, or a very proper area for reproduction, which is very much important. But when it comes to the smaller organisms like insects, do we actually see them properly, whether they migrate, whether they stay in a particular area or not? That is a kind of an area where we might lack. Now, I'm speaking in the context of an Indian place where most of the larger animals are highlighted because they becomes an indicator for biological degradation of area, etc. Now, when it comes to the availability of natural patches, it will be very small, a confined area, and in due course time, the population of different species gets accumulated in those areas. What happens? There is a sudden rise in the variety of species. And when there is a sudden rise in variety of species, obviously there is a rise in competition for food, shelter, and the mating preference. Now, when I speak about insects, these insects has to adapt to a wide variety of factors. It might be biotic, it might be abiotic factors, and these factors play an important role in the life or life history of the insects. Uh, Now, let me just switch my focus from natural habitat patches to urban area. Since there is a lot of urbanization, obviously people, the community, or the municipal areas, any governmental organization tend to create a artificial greenery within the city limits, right? So we have gardens, we have natural patches, or if there is any natural patches available, it will be protected. Now, what happens to those insects which have lost their home from the natural areas? There is a tendency for their movement from those natural areas to these artificial, what you call the urban gardens. So when it comes to these urban gardens, yes, that is in search of food, shelter, or any other aspects. So adaptation of these insects to these areas is very much important. And one important factor that we need to understand is that insects has to adapt to higher temperature. Obviously, we have the concrete roads, we have glass, the buildings which are having glass which reflects the heat. Obviously, the internal temperature within the city limits tend to increase, and then the insects has to increase. So what happens to the water content in the area? Obviously, there is a huge amount of vaporization, and any natural source of water body will be having depletion of water content. Now, these are the very much important factors which we have to focus. Urban gardens are not actually created or it is not an intention to promote the growth of biodiversity in an area. But in general, if you put together all the urban gardens within a city limit, it makes an important contribution to the urban green space. Now, I said that, did I say the important green space? Because those are a micro habitat for all this variety of insects. So what we have to focus here? We have to focus about, we need to observe how does organisms adapt, how does they have a preference towards food source, whether in natural habitats when they had a one particular flower visiting, bumblebee or a bee, honeybee, any of these insects, they visit a particular species specific flower for their nutrition. Now, whether there is a change, whether they are adapting to this new food source, and also we need to focus about how they counteract to the threats, predatory threats they face. Because if there are small green patches, there's a tendency for birds, there's a tendency for other reptiles to accumulate or aggregate there, because they also have observed that there is a lot amount of biodiversity like insects for their consumption. How does these insects or insects can avoid such threats? So we need to focus all these areas when it comes to study about insects in urbanized area. Okay. Along with that, if they are adapting to natural habitats, we need to understand how do they adapt to the presence of humans, because they thrive in a proximity for humans. Whether we humans, our day-to-day activities are hindering their activities, whether they have a problem with movement, whether there is a problem with acquiring food resource, whether there is a problem with their nest construction, etc. We need to focus so that if there is a chance, so that we can allow these insects to grow further, how we can coexist within urban cities and make the best possible space for these insects. Okay, I think that will be a brief starting. Now focusing on a particular aspect or a particular insect, that is a wasp. I think I'll go for my presentation. Okay, I'll continue with my presentation slide. Yeah, is a slide visible?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Now, as you can see that is a cover page, that is wasp, solitary wasp called as Delta Pyriformi. I think most of you know that. Do you know that wasp? It's a mud nesting wasp. Okay. Now, my research is based exclusively on this particular wasp species. To continue, yeah, just brief about these concepts. Okay. What was the focus of my study? Now, my focus was what is the type of habitat preference, what is the food source, what are the materials they used, and what is the type of nest construction or the pattern that these insects or wasps show, and how does the climate affects the behavior of these solitary wasps. To brief, what was the number of species that I used to observe? Totally I constricted my study to 30 species. In that it be like 22 species were solitary wasps, whereas some 7 species were social wasps. Now social wasp, I wanted to have a comparison with the solitary wasp, which I'll be dealing further. Okay, now if I have to split the number of wasp species for my studies, starting, you can see in the blue color, 30 species, then split into 22 solitary type and then 7 social wasp. Further, the solitary type were again separated, like 8 species they construct mud nest, 6 species they construct nests in burrows or hollow regions, that is either available in trees, plants, or any other rocks, etc. There are 3 species which is only burrowing kind, and then there are 2 parasitic wasp species. That means they lay their eggs in the nest of other wasps, and then 3 species which lay its egg on the body of a prey or any other organism. So this is how I separated them for the studies. Okay, these are some of the photographs that you can see which are taken in my study area. And for your information, my study area was the campus. One of the objective was to study wasps within the campus. As I said, it is a very huge campus, around 100 acres, and then you have natural patches of vegetation. Then there is artificial garden created, and you had at least a continuity of green patch from main building to rest of the areas within the campus boundary. So you can see the variety of species that were present there. Okay. Okay. Hope this screen may be visible. If I can, yeah, I can zoom it. Okay. Now, if you see from 1 to 12 species, the reason I'm showing this slide is that all these are solitary wasp species. On the right side, you can see that most of them construct mud nest and they collect wet mud and they build a pattern. And the nest construction or the pattern of nest construction is very much specific to these insects or these wasps. When it comes to feeding of the young ones, before an egg is laid within the nest, mud nest, they capture, they paralyze, and then transfer different insects as a prey or food for their young ones. And the selection of species or selection of prey is very much species specific. Okay, by chance, if there is no availability of a species specific prey, then the chances of nest construction and their future young ones generation is also been hindered or it is stopped. In solitary wasp, the parental care is minimum, because until it lays an egg, there is a parental caring. Later on, it just completes the nest and goes away from it. Next on, another 5 to 6 species, they are called as mud dabbers. What they do is they construct tubular nests. When it compares to the solitary wasp, the first one which I said, those are pot-like structures. Now this is tube-like structures. Okay, and then here this Scaphinae species, they have a species-specific collection of spiders only. Most of these wasps comes under Scaphinae, collects spiders. Sometimes there are cockroaches also can be seen, but most of them which I observed were spiders. And again, when it comes to spiders, highest were Salticida family spiders, which were paralyzed, they were stung, they were paralyzed and kept within the mud nest. One species which I observed, it was a burrowing nest. So under inside the ground, it makes a burrow. I will show that. Yeah, you can see here. This is a species which was burrowing. Okay, you can see in the mandible, it is carrying a stone which is larger than its head size. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Coming to the last part of this slide, you have solitary social wasp species, and all of these social wasp species which I observed were constructing nest, which is an open type of a nest made up of plant fibers. They tend to regurgitate water, then they masticate the plant fibers, make it as a pulp, which is similar to that of a paper pulp, and then they come to the location of nesting and then they construct nests. So most of you might have observed this. And then the parental caring is throughout the developmental stages of their young ones until the ferret adult that emerges from the pupal case. Till then there is a parental caring scene. And the last part of the slide here, you can see 3 species which are parasitic or parasitoid forms. One of them paralyzes the cockroach and lay a single egg at the neck of the cockroaches. So that is how it continues its generation. The other one is a parasitoids of other wasps. That means it lay egg in the nest of other wasp species. And then the last one, that is Ivania appendicaster, it is a parasite of cockroach eggs. Okay. Now I explained all these, the wasp nesting and all. This is totally with reference to the location where there is presence of human. Presence of human means you have food storage or any other organic material, because of which the cockroaches are present, and because of the presence of cockroach you can find some of these wasp species. Plus gardens are present, since it is an artificial garden, or the humans or the people who look after it tend to grow more number of plant variety of species. It might be fruit bearing, it might be flowering, it might be any other source of material. But when it comes to diversity of plant itself, it will be high or more in a small area. So that is why I could figure out so much species within a small patch of habitat. Going further, let me discuss how does temperature, rainfall variation, food source availability, and the mud nesting varies, and how does all of these are interconnected. Now, in this photograph, you can see that where I have mentioned the text water content mud, that is the constructed area. It is under construction. It was under construction, and it is just after the month of July. Once the rain has been subsided, there was small here and there pools of water. Now the arrow mark which I'm showing is, it is a highlighted region where these wasps is coming to that area and collecting the wet mud. In the rest of the area, since it is a hilly place where the water gets drained, and because it is a laterite stone, the water logging is very much less. So because there is a construction going on, because there is an exposed land and the water cannot move, now that becomes a small area where the wasps have the ability get access to the mud or wet mud, so that it can construct a nest. Okay, I'm telling that such kind of areas are, unknowingly created for these insects. Okay, in this you can see some of the examples how they utilize the area in and around humans so that they can construct a mud nest. The first one is Delta Pyriformi. You can see it is carrying a mud ball with the help of the pair of mandibles and the first pair of legs. You can see that it has clearly made a round ball, and then it can carry to from the uh, outside the area to the inside of the apartments or buildings, and then it has been constructing mud nest. The second photo, the same Delta Pyriformi, it is breaking through the mud nest after the development. The third photo on the top right corner is the wasp called as Feminus flavopictum. Again, it's a solitary wasp. We can see a pot-shaped nest it has been constructing, and only the abdomen is been inserted inside to lay an egg. Lower left corner, you can see Sclerophons pyrifex species, which is called also called as mud dabber. It is collecting mud from the region near the garden, where after the garden has been watered, there is water logging here and there. So this species has an accessibility for those regions. The next image on the lowermost, you can see Scleroform commentarium, which is constructing a nest attached to the cables, the cables that runs within the building. And then the last image, you can see the Rhopalidia brevata, social wasp species, which is masticating a partially degraded leaf which had fallen in those waterlogged areas. So this is how these species of wasp starts collecting the materials, which is very much important for their nest construction. Though there is no availability of good rain, because of the availability of water due to the human activity, they utilize all those regions or all those time. Okay, you can see the variety of nest structures. On the left side, you can see a very huge nest constructed by a single female, and that nest itself weighs around 530 grams. You should understand that the time it has spent, that energy that has spent to construct so huge nest, and also that nest is been partially camouflaged with the foliage, or it is camouflaged with the bark of the plant. And on the right side, you can see on a red background, there's a construction of nest. The white one, what you can see, it is application of white cement or the white paint on the nest, because just above that red paint, there is white paint. So it needs to merge with the color of the background. So it is partially created a brown and a white combination. Now that is a kind of adaptation that you can see by the wasp. On the top right corner, you can see the Delta Pyriformi has been constructing nest on a chair which has been just abandoned or thrown at the corner of a building. So it finds, it understands, it locates a place where there is less human activity, but still humans are present over there, but it is less disturbed. So these are all the nests which I have collected, photographed in the place where we humans were there, where there is day-to-day activities, but still these insects have been adapted to such locations. Now, these are some of the photographs, examples of varieties of paper nest that you can see. All of these nests were constructed attached to buildings or barks, etc. You can see the left bottom corner. It is very huge. It was around 3 to 4 feet in length and around 1.5 feet in diameter. So huge it is. That means around 10 to 15 thousands of wasp individuals might be inside, because when we removed, because it was causing a threat to all the students who are, it is in a college, okay, in the university which I was performing my studies. So we had to remove it. It was a very difficult task. On the right corner bottom, you can see it is around 4.5 feet huge nest, and it is in a resident location. And that owner of the house didn't know for past 3 years that there was a so huge nest. When I was just passing on to that location, finding out some wasp species, I could see some white brown color extension. Then when I contacted the house owner and we went to the first floor, we could see a very huge nest, which is around, size of almost the size of me. I'm 5.7 feet. It was around 5 feet, very huge. By chance there was any kind of a damage, maybe by birds or anything, obviously thousands of insects would have spread across that locality, and whoever comes in between the humans, it would have stung. Okay, so that is how these insects have been adapting each year. Okay, now before I explain this slide, let me go to the other data. The first graph that you can see is the precipitation or rainfall that has been occurred in Mangaluru city. Now, you can observe there 2014, 2015, 16, and 17, 3 different years, and the graph represents that 14, 15, and 17, sorry, 16, there was a rise, but from 15 to 16, it is a double of precipitation, there is a rainfall. And on 17, there was again slightly lesser. Okay, just remember this slide because I want to explain more about this. Coming to the temperature record, obviously we in India we have this 3 seasons, that is summer, rainfall, and then the winter. Actually we don't feel winter so chill, it is almost similar to that of a summer. Only thing that we temperature is not too high, it is acceptable. So you can see the graph, the variation, and for all the 4 years it is almost similar, but in the year 2016 there was a sudden change of a 1 to 2 degree increase, and that is also an important aspect which I want to discuss. Next, you have the humidity. So since we are in a coastal area and the temperature is also high, the precipitation or the humidity in the air is also too much. So keeping all these data, I want to discuss how there is a variation of wasp species. Now this graph represents all the wasp species put together. Okay, all the wasp species put together out of 30 species. Now if you see the graph, in the month of, I'll just enlarge. Okay, focus the focus your view in the month of May, June, July, and August. Okay, now this is a month. At the end of May or the first week of the June, we have the starting of rainy season, and then it goes up to the peak in the month till the month of August. Okay, after that there is less amount of rainfall. Now this graph is not about the rainfall, this graph is about the total number of variety of wasp species that I have observed. Okay, now based on the different types of rainfall, you can see that increase in number of species goes on increasing from the month of July to November, and then it starts declining from December, and then it still declines January, February, and up to May. Okay, up to May. So this is a cycle, and every year this cycle repeats. Now, why there is this kind of a particular cycle? Wasps are known to be reproductively active after the month of, June or July. Reproductively active. Now, why reproductively active in that month? Because it is the month where rainy season is there, huge amount of precipitation takes place, because of which there is availability of caterpillars, availability of varieties of insects, again variety of spider species also. When there is a source of food for these wasps, only then the wasp goes for construction of nest. That means they go for reproduction. If there is less amount of prey species, obviously they tend to reduce the number of nesting. So that is why if you see the color, that is blue, red, and green, every year there is an increase, but compared to the year wise, there is a decrease in number of species. Hope you get my point. Did you get my point? That means what I want to say is year by year there is a decline, but within the range of month in a year, there is an increase and then decrease. Now let me go back to this slide of rainfall. Okay. My data starts from 2015, 16, and 17, but I also took the record of the rainfall from 2014, up a year back from my study. Because if you have to study insect for today, you need to understand how was the what is the importance of rainfall or any other climatic factors at least few months or a year before, because that is a criteria or a factor which is very much important. Now, 2014. 476 millimeters of rainfall, it is a normal rainfall for our coastal regions of Mangaluru. Okay, next year there was a slightly increase around 599, but compared to 2016 it was double. That means it is not an expected type of rainfall which are created floods, destruction of natural habitats, there was landslides, etc. So that was a very bad year due to the rainfall. Later in 2017, it was around 868 millimeters. Again, that was also problematic. Now, coming back to 2014, which is a normal type of rainfall which we had, obviously there will be growth of lot amount of insect species. The caterpillars will be there. There will be nymph of grasshoppers or beetles or anything. So all this becomes the food for young ones. And that is why after the rainfall from June, July, you can see there is an increase in number of species. Now, if the solitary wasp is taken, if you study the life stages or the number of days it takes for the egg to the development of the adult, it is around 28 to 32 days. So within a month, you can get the next generation. Okay. Now, within a month difference, you can see there is a step-by-step increase in total number of wasp species. And then you can see the rise. Later on, as the number of prey species decreases, you have a decrease in the total number of wasp species. So this graph represents how there is a change, and because of the change in the rainfall, how it has affected the total number of wasp species every year. So blue, you can see that 2015, very good number. 2016, there was a change, that is reduction, and 2017, there was still more reduction. Now at the present day, if I go to the same area to identify what are the type of species that are present, I can find very, very less number, because this year from the month of January, February, there was intermittent a small amount of rain, and this is truly a change in the climatic factors of the weather conditions here, and it is too much humid also. So obviously this graph will decline so much if I make a year study now, because I stopped my studies because of this pandemic condition. So I can repeat that there will be a very much decline in total number of species of wasps that are available in this location. Okay, hope you got my points. Okay, let me go further. Now, why there is such a variation? Is it that just because of a heavy rainfall there is a variation in number of species? No, we need to understand a small aspect like how is the mouth parts or the pattern of mouth parts in these species. The first and second image you can see, first one is the mouth part of a Delta Pyriformi, which is a solitary wasp which construct mud nest which looks like a earthen pot. Okay, you can see the mandible. It is long, okay, curved, and then there is no serration or teeth like structure. Okay, that one. On the right side you can find this is a Scleriform commentarium head. It is having a small curved very one single pointed mandible. Okay, now how does this affect nesting? For the comparison with the solitary wasp, if you see the social wasp species, the mandibles of these wasp species of all those wasps which are constructing paper nest, in general we call paper nest, they have very short mandible, and then it is having 3 to 4 teeth on the edges. Now, why is this variation? Now, when it comes to social wasp, they need to scrape plant fibers from different plant source so that the maximum energy it has to put on the biting or chewing. That is why the mandibles are very short. If you increase the length of the mandible, it's difficult to apply large amount of pressure, and then you cannot scrape out the materials. That is why there is a modification in mandible structure also. When it comes to species wise, yes, there is a changes in varieties of species. You can see here, mandibles are very much required for these wasp species to excavate wet mud. And once the mud is being excavated, needs to be molded into a ball along with the help of first pair of legs. And to carry it, it bends the head. And since the mandibles are curved from the head region to the abdominal section, it becomes like a, like a cup-like shape. And with the help of first pair of legs, you can see here, you can see that with the help of first pair of legs, it is carrying the mud ball. And this is a repeated cycle until unless there is a construction of a large number of cells. Now, this wasp, Delta Pyriformi, can construct up to 25 to 30 individual cells. That means they can lay 25 to 30 eggs. Now, for each eggs, okay, it requires 4 to 5 prey. Each eggs, it requires 4 to 5 prey. That means each prey, it is each cycle. Now, you just calculate the number of times it is making trips, and then what is the amount of energy and time it requires to construct so much number of nests in one season. Okay, so it is a very tedious job for this wasp, and overcoming all the negative aspects, human interaction. There are birds within the campus, around 100 species of birds that are there. The bee eaters are there. There are different lizards, etc., which are known to consume these wasps. Okay, out of all these threats and stress it has, it needs to perform the activity so that the young ones will grow further. So that is why mandibles are very much important for these species to construct a very good nest and confine or protect the young ones. Okay. Not only that, the mandible is very much sclerotized. You can see there is a change in color. You can see here at the tip of the mandible, it is dark color. So there are different research papers mentioning that there is a deposition of magnesium or some metal components so that it gives the hardness to this mandible. Okay, and because it is very hard, it can scrape out the mud layers and then it reaches outside of the nest. And here the consistency of the mud is also very much important. If there is too much clay amount in that nest, these wasps cannot burrow the hole. It will die inside. I have found some of the nest, because it was very hard, and maybe because the wasp couldn't differentiate too much clay components and then too much of the other larger granules of the sand. So what has happened, the young ones, the ferret adults, couldn't come out because they couldn't scrape out the nest. They couldn't make a burrow and come out, so they died inside. Once I cut open the nest, I could understand this. Okay. Okay, when it comes to social wasp, the mandibles of these wasps are very short and they articulate dorsoventrally, and this permits them to move in one plane. So it's like a saw or a scissor, like you can cut it off. Chewing of wood or plant fibers, and it is also helpful for chewing the prey also. Okay, now if I have that image, okay, you can see in the first top row corner, the two images is about Vespa tropica. It is one of the largest social wasp that you can find in our country. And then on the right side, you have Rhopalidia brevata. On the lower portion, you have Rhopalidia marginata. Now, if I zoom this image, the lower one, you can see that two wasps are actually biting and separating the portion of the body of a caterpillar. Now, what is it doing over there? And the place where they're standing is the nest, and they take up this clump of larva or caterpillar. They break down, they cut it off, masticate it, and make it like a juicy form, and then this juicy form is being fed to the developing larvae. So here, that is what in solitary wasp there is a continuous form of parental caring. Okay, and there is no a kind of a species specific selection of any prey. Whatever the prey or the insect that are available within the locality, they will be utilizing it. And there are also instances that this species Vespa tropica, it is since it is larger in size, individual can attack a whole nest of Rhopalidae marginata or bravata, and then it removes the wasp larva, and then it has been masticated and it gives to their young ones of Vespa tropica. So such kind of uh, relationship, or the what you call, like, between the same family, like you can find there's a competition. So here overall, to tell that mandible is a very much important factor when it comes for reproduction or nesting. Okay, you can see here delta pyriformi. This is how it carries the caterpillars. You can see that the head of the caterpillar, which is highly sclerotized, it is harder. It has been held with the help of mandible and first pair of leg, whereas the abdomen is free, and this female intermittently stings the caterpillar. Now, why it stings? It is only to paralyze, but they also know that how much amount of venom has to be injected. By chance, if there is an excess dose of venom, that caterpillar would die because of paralysis, and then it will not be a nutritive value for their young ones. So until unless there is a struggle that is being subsidized by the caterpillar, it stings with a small amount of dosage, and later on it carries to the nest, and then it seals it inside the nest with a one single egg. Now it comes to the energy source for these wasps. All the adults are having a biting, not chewing, but biting and sucking type of mouth parts. You have mandible that needs to break down some of the materials, but there is a tubular suction kind of a mouth where it needs to suck the nectar out of the flower. So you can see on the left corner, most of the wasp species tend to attend flowers and then they consume nectar. Now it is just similar to that of honeybees. These are also involved in pollination since they visit much of the plant source. On the right side corner, you can see the larva of delta pyriforme. It has been feeding on the caterpillar. Now caterpillar is actually paralyzed, it is not dead, and you can see that green color in the abdominal section of the larva of wasp. Initially, the larva of wasp is having a very small mandible, which is sufficient to bore hole in the caterpillar, and it consumes all the liquid form, maybe hemolymph or any other materials that are already partially digested because of the venom of the wasp. And as it grows bigger, as it starts molting, the mandibles becomes highly sclerotized, and then entire larval case or the outside of the case is being consumed. So that is how the life cycle goes, which is actually another objective of my research. On the lower portion, you can see the solitary families of spiders have been paralyzed. Now you can see the varieties of size and number of spiders. Now this I collected from a single tubular nest of delta pyriforme, single tubular nest. Now if it is constructing around 20 or 15 to 20 nests, that vegetation or the locality needs to have large amount of spiders, and spiders are again dependent on the presence of other insects. So it's like a food chain. Insects should be present, spiders should attack them, they need to reproduce more, and because there are a large number of spiders, a wasp can survive or give rise to young ones. And you can see here a larva has been attached to the abdominal section of the spider, which is a paralyzed form, and then they make an entry and then consumes all the hemolymph first. Later on, the exoskeleton of the spider is being discarded. So this is how energy source is being acquired by adults and the larval forms. So all these activities are affected by climatic factors. Now, when I spoke about the rainfall, when there was a high amount of rainfall in 2016, and at that time period, when I collected varieties of mud nest, you could find that there is a growth of fungus because the nest could get wet. There might be moisture content available. Otherwise, the mud nests are very much dry. There is very few amount of moisture content in the nest. And then if there is no ability of prey for ants, you can see there in the lower image, the fire ants or the red ants, Formicidae family, they burrow holes and then actually dismantle all the parts of the wasp which is actually developing, and then they take it to their nest. So this is a kind of threats these wasps will be facing when there is shortage of other food source. This is a kind of competition. Though they all come under same order Hymenoptera, ants, bees, and wasps, there is a competition between these species. Okay, and this is one scenario. There are multiple scenarios where ants attacking huge number of mud nests. They burrow a hole, they destroy the larval forms, they even carry the caterpillars to their nest, and then the next generation of wasps are not growing. So this is how a rainfall alone can affect the growth development of any solitary wasp. Okay, the other factor I want to mention is that just give me a minute. Okay, now when it comes to the parasitic wasp or parasitoid wasp, which I spoke about, one of the we call it as I just forgot the name. Sorry, it is a metallic green color which looks similar to that of a bee. Mm, sorry, I forgot the name. Okay, now
Is
that is
it
one.
Chrysididae?
Yeah, correct. Chrysalidae. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Candice. The Chrysalidae species are having a different variety of species. And now each species, like at least 3 to 4 species, if you can find in a locality, now each one of them, it's like how a quail, quail, right? That lays egg in the nest of the crow. Same way, this Chrysalidae goes and lay the egg in one of the variety of solitary wasp. Like one Chrysalidae species will lay egg in specifically in Delta Pyriformi nest because of their larger size. And if there is a smaller size variety of Chrysalidae, then it might go to a mud dabber nest and then lay eggs. So it's like an dependence by the presence of these solitary wasps. These Chrysalidae can exist or they can continue their number. Okay, so this is in simple. I wanted to speak about how only the rainfall, the temperature can affect their activity. When it comes to temperature, if there is high amount of temperature, you know that these insects are dependent on the environmental temperature, and all of this activity will be hindered if there is a rise in temperature. That is why when I showed this graph, when there is a high temperature from February end to May end, there is less amount of activity of these wasps. So there is no nesting, there is no capturing of prey, and then obviously there is no generation of young ones. Once there is average temperature reduces, the activity increases, and that is why you can get this kind of a graph. Okay, so this is very good example for temperature dependent activity and the presence or absence of multiple wasp species. Okay, in the sense like Candice, is there still time or I need to wind up? Do I have still time?
A little more time. A little more time is okay. Yeah.
10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. So now, when it comes to the wasp studies, the solitary wasp, many of the researchers will go for parasitic wasp species because they, if you study them, their life cycle, their presence, etc., you can use them as controlling for other insects or biocontrollers. Okay. Here, why I choose solitary wasp species, because why can't we, if we study the solitary wasp, why can't we use them as indicators of biological degradation? Why, I'll tell. Now, if one species has to be species specifically capture a caterpillar which is attacking a cabbage, it's like a cabbage moth caterpillar. Now, if one species is attacking that species only, now the caterpillar has to be available in that locality. If that species of caterpillar has to be present, you need vegetation, and that vegetation, if it is to be present, obviously good amount of rainfall, nice temperature, and other factors should be present. Now, if you by just studying wasp species, you can indirectly understand what are the other insect species that were already present, or which are the predictable insects that can be available in those area. Now, by just studying wasp, you can understand whether there was a presence of crickets, cockroaches, beetles, grasshoppers, then many varieties of bees, etc. So if you understand the wasp species, indirectly you can get the data of what are the other types of arthropods that are present in that locality. So why can't we use this solitary wasp species as an indicator for any kind of biological degradation? And then once you understand the life cycle of them, you can actually remove the nest, you can actually remove the egg, the caterpillars that are present over there. You can start treating these caterpillar with any potential, pesticide, insecticides and all, just to understand whether you can analyze the passing of chemicals from the caterpillar to the wasp once they consume. Okay, so if in the area, if you want to identify a potential threat of any toxin chemicals, I think by understanding the life cycle of these wasps, you can get a direct data. Okay, whether there is a transfer between the species from the caterpillars to the young ones, whether there is teratogenic effect, whether there is deformity seen in the insects, etc. You can study. So and why solitary wasps? Because these wasps, which are the examples I shown, they construct nest on the outside of the ground where it is visible, so that you can collect them, you can analyze them, you can study easily, because collection makes it very much easier. Most of the species which are ground dwelling or burrowing in the nature, you cannot identify them at all. It is very difficult to know the location. Once you know the location, you do not know how far or how depth the nest is to collect any other samples. So why cannot we use these species of solitary wasp as bioindicators? I'm not speaking about social wasp, only solitary wasp. Okay, we can also understand how the geographical distribution is present, how is the variation in the diversity, whether the diversity of these species depends on other species or presence or absence, and how come the alteration in the climatic changes can affect directly or indirectly on these species. So overall put together, yeah. So overall put together, what happens that, like, we observe that vast species are capable of adapting to human settlements. That's what you can see from these slides. Like all these places where human inhabitants and the wasps have been constructing nests over there. Okay, so throughout the year, since the gardens that are present within the campus, one or the other plants were available, either flowering or fruiting. So flowering plants are found abundantly. So there is richness in the plant species, and because of which there is a increased number of wasp species, because there are presence of prey species. So the reason for the success of wasp are due to fragmented habitats which provide ideal conditions for growth and development. Okay, I'll go back to the video. Okay, to conclude, the reason for the success of these wasp species are due to the number of fragmented habitats that were present within the campus, or you can extend this study for all those gardens that are present within the city area or limits. Now, the resident sites, even if you take your home, at least you will grow some plants. Again, if you identify the number of insects over there, again you can find at least 2 to 3 varieties of wasp species inhabiting over there. So our data, whatever the data that we collected, I have not shown much of the data here, because still I have to go for publication some of the other data. So our data indicated that since the campus maintains varieties of gardens, and here maintenance is just by organic, no any chemicals or pesticides are sprayed. Only the vermicompost are being utilized to grow plants, and then varieties of flowering and fruit bearing plants have been present over there. So because of this varieties of flowering plants, trees, or shrubs, the abundance of wasps were significantly high, and as the gardens were not treated with any kind of chemicals or pesticides. So what does this indicate? This indicates that you can maintain a habitat where you can make the insects to come settle, and by unknowingly or knowingly you can increase the diversity of these species. And if by chance there is a loss of that species from that area, you can clearly understand what was the changes, whether it was climatic or whether it was human interactions that has destroyed some of the wasp species. Okay. When it comes to the factors, factors like temperature, rainfall, the soil texture, forgot to mention about soil texture. When I showed some of the photos of the nest, you could see that some of the nests were very, smooth surface. There was very less amount of grains, soil grains that was visible. But in some other mud nest, there was high number of granules of sand. Now again, the selection of soil or the sand components or texture is again species specific. Okay, so the consistency of the soil is dependent on the amount of rainfall. So everything is like interconnected. If you do not have much of the water available after the rain, then these wasp species cannot have a very good consistency to construct a mud nest. If there was too much high amount of a clay soil, then the young ones cannot make a burrow and come out of the nest. So it is all interdependent. Okay. So finally, I want to conclude that such kind of studies on solitary wasp or any other wasp species, we can understand a year before or more than that by studying at least nest itself, how many types of wasp species are present. If you know the wasp species, what are the prey that they used to select, and indirectly you can predict what was the biodiversity available in terms of insect biodiversity in that locality. So this is what I wanted to share part of my research with you all. So that's all. So over to Candice.
Yay.
I
Thank you,
think, yeah. Hello?
Hi. Great.
Yeah, you can.
Great job. Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay. Yeah.
Beautiful pictures.
Thank you. Thank you. Hope you liked it, because I made it very much
Beautiful.
general.
Yeah.
Very much general
Yeah.
concepts.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, well,
I have a question on.
Oh, go for it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
On the social wasps, the ones that were together.
Yes.
Were the females competing with each other, did you say, for the caterpillars, or were they cooperating? And
It was
what
a cooperation.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
So
You carry
are
on the
they-
question.
Are they sisters or are they?
Yes.
Oh, they are. Okay.
Okay. To explain that, the caste system in honeybees. Similarly, you have a caste system in wasp also, because all are come under the same Hymenoptera. There is you cannot find a queen in a distinctive way. The morphology is almost similar to the drones that are present over there. Males, the female workers. The drones are the one which are males, which are only responsible for mating with female for the production of young ones. But again, since the condition is haplodiploidy of chromosomes, where it gives rise to sexual determination as male and female, most of the individuals in the nest are female. Queen will be there, but most of the work is done by the workers, which are female again. All the female, it will be suppressed by the pheromones or the hormones secretion of the queen. Now there in that photograph which I shown, it is not a competition. Maybe one female worker has brought a chunk of a caterpillar body, and then it cannot be directly given to the young one. So another worker comes into the picture, and then they try to break it off into smaller bits of pieces, and then they start masticating. And there is also observation that the juicy part is being absorbed, okay,
Yeah.
when once they start masticating, and then the exoskeleton of the caterpillar is thrown, or sometimes it can be given to the young one. But if the larval forms is very, very small, since they cannot masticate the exoskeleton of the caterpillar, these female workers regurgitate the content which they have sucked in to these young ones. So it's like, transferring from mouth to mouth. So it's a cooperative. There is no chance of like a competition for food, because all of them, they prefer high sugar source, which is a nectar for the energy. Okay, this has to be metabolized for the young ones to grow for like a protein rich source. So that is a variation.
Okay. That answers my question. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, okay. Anybody else?
Well, thank you very much for coming and sharing. It's really interesting. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have
Okay.
one of the greenhouses that I take care of. We have mud daubers in the summer, and
Mud
I
daubers
see-
in some, huh.
yeah, I see them flying around, like hunting for spiders,
Correct,
and
correct.
and then sometimes I find the nests. One time I found it on the bottom of a folding chair. One time I found it in between two pots that were stuck together. When I pulled them apart, there was
Correct.
them.
And
Yeah.
you can find them in most of the switchboards where you have the plugs,
Yeah.
the sockets. It is a ready-made holes that are available, and that hole is sufficient for their body size. Instead of constructing a complete entire nest, which their body can fit, it is a ready available one. So you can find there.
That's neat.
I have a question for you, just a quick one.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah.
Are any of the ones you were looking at, the solitaries, were any of them non-aculeate, non-stinging?
No.
So you
Males
don't
are
have any
non-stinging.
parasitic?
No.
You don't have any of that group? No. Okay.
No, all the wasp species which I observed, most of the time I could get the female ones because they are highly active. They all are stinging ones.
All stinging.
Parasitic, which I said that the Evanidae species, which is a parasitic on the cockroach egg. Okay, the egg case they
Okay.
have.
One
And
egg
then
parasite.
yeah, one more is Ampullexus compressor, which is parasitic on the cockroach adult. They paralyze the cockroach adult and then they lay egg on the body of it. And as Candice said, the chrysidid species, which is a parasitic one.
But it's aculeate. It's in a
Yeah,
different. Yeah.
it's a different type. It's not
Taxonomically, yeah.
axonomical. It's like on the body, not inside the body.
Right.
Okay, inside the body. So that is a kind of variation. And all these wasp species, either parasitic or exoparasitic or whatever, depends on the presence of these solitary wasp or aculeate wasp species. And all the wasp species which I encountered are females, because in action, when you go to study them or capture them, obviously you get them female. When I started collecting the nest, collecting the egg and caterpillar, I started rearing them in the laboratory. At that time, I could get the males. So obviously they do not have the sting, and they do not bite also with the help of mandibles. So you can actually touch them, and almost in a year around 150 to 200 varieties of the solitary wasp I would keep in the laboratory, rear them and leave them. Usually what happens is that since it is a complex area, it is a college, and then the workers, the sweepers, they tend to destroy this nest since they are constructed on the walls. So I go to that area, they call me, like there is a wasp nest. So I collect that nest, and then I break it open very carefully, and then keep it in different glass materials. I'll sterilize them, I'll swipe it with alcohol so that there is no fungal growth or bacterial growth. And then every day I'll keep on a check. And once after a month, 30 days or 35 days, we can get adult, and I release it in the place where I found them. So at least like that, it's a kind of studying their life cycle, plus I feel that I was much helpful in retaining these species within the area. So that's all. Okay. Anybody else?
Great, thanks a lot. Very nice talk.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for listening to me.
Mhm. Yeah.
Manu,
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, without further ado, I would like to end the meeting, and I will let you know when we schedule our next one.
thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.
Good night.
Yeah, good night for you all because it's a day for me.
Oh yeah.
Good
Good
night, all.
morning. Good morning.
Yeah, good. Thank you.